Yay! So welcome everybody to our unschooling Q&A today. And we kind of picked a topic of screen time, but it's also a general question and answer on unschooling that you're welcome to ask any questions on. We just thought we've done 2 of these already, and we thought, let's have a little theme topic today too. So we're going to introduce ourselves. So who would like to go first? Robin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So thank you very much, Judy. My name is Robin Robertson, and I am an unschooling mom. I live in Canada, in Northern Alberta. I have 2 kids. My son is 14 and my daughter is 11. We have unschooled for over 8 years, but really we started out as world schoolers traveling and fairly traditionally homeschooling, and then found our way somehow into unschooling. I'm also a podcast creator and host. I'm the host of Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, a podcast on homeschooling, home education, unschooling, alternative education, really on all the different ways that we can create a unique learning journey for our families. And yeah, welcome everyone. I'll keep it brief. I'll keep it at that. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Robin. Golda, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. My name is Golda David. I'm a former principal and former high school teacher, and now an unschooling mother. I also am a lead facilitator or homeschool coordinator in a public school division here in Alberta. I've been unschooling my son, well, on and off, I think, because it took me a while to get there, but since he was in grade 3 and he's in grade 6 now. So we've come on quite the journey to unschooling, mostly because of Robin's podcast and Judy's book, I think. And I'm currently writing a book about how the school system works and how the education system works in general, and how to write lesson plans and little things like that. Anyway, that's me.
Yay! Well, welcome, Golda and Robin. My name is Judy Arnall. I started homeschooling. I have 5 kids. They now range in age from 18 to 29. And I started homeschooling with my 2 oldest kids, and I became the mother I didn't want to be. I yelled so much at them to get the work done. And while juggling a preschooler and a baby. So more and more we slid into unschooling. We let go of the curriculum and just played. And we played for the next 10 years. And then my kids did a self-designed high school program through home education. They got scholarships, they got high school diplomas, and then they went on to university. So 3 of my kids have graduated. One is still in university, and one is in a master's program. And the youngest is trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life. So, and I wrote a book on our pursuits called Unschooling to University. But I've actually written a lot of books. Here's my brain, because I taught parenting for Alberta Health Services for 13 years, and I taught parenting at University of Calgary for 13 years. So I'm gonna today on Screen Time, I'm gonna bring in what I know on brain development and addictions from Alberta Health Services and the brain story. So now what I'd like to do too is I want to throw out there to Robin and Golda. Everybody has a different definition of what unschooling is. And if you're here for the first time, you may have heard things. You're still trying to clarify for yourself what it is and what it isn't. So Robin, you went first. So Golda, tell us what your definition of unschooling is.
My definition of unschooling is that the child takes all or most of the lead in deciding what they learn. So, and I think the strength of that is that they're going to learn deeply, just because people like learning. Humans enjoy learning; it's fun. But when you're forcing them to learn something they're not interested in, then first of all, they don't want to do it, and secondly, they they don't remember any of it. So I think it's looking at really how learning is, what learning is, and how humans learn in a more deep way. That's my definition of unschooling.
Hey, thank you. Robin?
I like it. I like what you had to say, Gold. I agree. Unschooling. So I think really unschooling, yeah, is definitely looking how we learn and honoring that learning journey and honoring that individual person as well. Unschooling is, I think it's unschooling because it's not following the traditional structure of the school or framework where learning is done to you, as opposed to letting our child having our children direct their learning and supporting them in their learning, working alongside them instead of on top of them. And it's really, you know, child directed, child led, but it's person led, because I consider myself an unschooler now as well as an adult. I think we all eventually begin as unschoolers, and hopefully we get to the point where we end as unschoolers as well. So that's really what unschooling is. And it's not unparenting or not parenting or a free for all, which I think is sometimes what it gets confused with. You're still a parent, you're still present in many, many, many ways. And it's supporting interest, respect, as well as a big part of unschooling, and passions. And it's also in that way, because it's not like school, but that doesn't mean that your child can't do any school-like things. Unschoolers still take classes, they still have teachers and mentors, but it's really driven by the child, their interests, and what they're learning and discovering. So that's my loose definition.
Okay, and my definition is along the same lines. The child or the learner decides what they want to learn, when, how, where, from who, and even if they want to learn something. So topics and curriculum is not forced on them. If there's any motivation problems, it's not unschooling. So no matter, even if you send your child to a self-directed school and they have to follow the curriculum and they don't want to follow the curriculum, that is not self-direction, and that's not unschooling. So yeah, that's kind of my definition. They decide everything. And like Robin said, it's not unparenting. Radical unschooling kind of goes into that realm where children decide everything about when they eat, when they sleep, those kinds of things. And for me, I'm more unschooling in terms of education, but in our family, we still have routines and we still have rhythms that meets everybody's needs. So I like what Robin said. It's not unparenting. It's very much hands-on parenting. It's not neglectful. It's just the child learns. Okay. Okay. So as we're heading into now, Robin, are you going to read out questions? And before we do, I'd just like to ask Robin and Golda, where are you on the screen time continuum? Are you more a limiter or are you more a unlimiter? And there's all shades, but I'll give you time to think, and I'll go first this time. I am on the far side of unlimited screen time. So my kids, it was bad. It was bad because I would be teaching parents about the screen time recommendations and limits. And then I go home and my kid's been on the screen 16 hours a day. So my 5 kids they're all video gamers, boys, girls, and we never really limited screen time or content either. They played educational games, but they also played Call of Duty and PUBG and everything else that's out there too. And so it was interesting, but it was good for me to watch how when they reached about 17, they became self-limiters. They could actually put things on hold for a couple months when they were in university to focus on coursework or things like that. Okay, and Robin, where are you at on that continuum?
I'm probably closer to the less limits, but I think I still have limits. And I think my continuum is continuously moving as well, depending on what's going on in our life, where my kids are at, and things that are happening in their life as well. So we're pretty unlimited when it comes to video games. My kids definitely play video games, but they're not huge gamers. I find they go in spurts where they're playing a lot and then they kind of leave it for a while, and then they come back to it. Right now, especially with COVID, it's been a great way for them to engage with their friends. Like they have like there's like these meetups that they all play together, and I think that's great, and we don't limit that. And they've actually, I found, have been, you know, they kind of take care of that themselves, really. Screen time, watching things. I think where we limit it is if there are things to do in the day, we ask our kids that they try and make sure those things are done. We say you have the day, try and get what you need to be complete. But at the same time, if it's getting on to the longer part of the day, and they've been on, their screens, it's get your things done before you go onto your screens. We live on a farm. There's duties, they have animals, there's things that just have to be cared for as well, and they're part of the family unit. So I think in that way we are limiting. The other thing is social media. And I think this is probably something we can talk about today too. I have a daughter, and I think that is, my son is not very big on social media. My daughter is more interested in it. And for content, for some things like that, she's 11. We definitely have a lot of conversations on, and things around there that structures around there, outlines around there that we want to be honored as well, really for her safety too. So there are some limits for us on social media. And then watching screens, there are not very big limits in our home. So I hope that makes sense to everybody, but then it changes as the year goes on. So.
Hey, thanks.
And I just also want to say, sorry, Golda, before interrupting you, this is also open discussion too. So if there's something that you would like to add, if you are on here and you'd like to add something further or engage in further discussion, that something maybe the question is brought up, please feel free to do so as well.
So my answer to that was I've actually been through that too. I had a limit of when he could start, and that was one of the things we're trying now, is having a time limit, but he can do it when he wants. So he has to, and he's responsible for keeping track of the time too, which is really frustrating for me because I also have to keep track of the time, which is kind of time consuming, and you're not always going to do that perfectly, but that was one of the things that I did, was having instead of having a time that he started, he has this many hours a day. So that was my answer to that problem, because I actually went through the same thing with my son too. He would wait for 4 o'clock and really drag his feet on all of the other things he was supposed to be doing, because he didn't want to be doing them. He wanted to be doing his screen time. So we tried, one of the compromises that I made was, okay, you can go on whenever, but here's your time limit. So that's what I did. And I don't know if that would work for you, but that was my idea.
I would say along those lines too is what some parents do is they do a ticket system. So one ticket would be for 1 hour, and they give their kids, say, 25 tickets for a week. So the child can decide if they want to, spend 12 hours on Sunday playing and really get somewhere in their games, because sometimes it really does take a long time to move up into games, depending on the game. And then through the week, they probably run out of tickets by Wednesday, but then they could kind of ration themselves. So that's one suggestion. My other suggestion is maybe sit down. Like, I find it's better to impose limits with the child, not at the child. So you sit down with your child and you say, here's my concerns. My concern is you need time to do your chores. You need time to do some physical activity, those kinds of things. And then that way, yeah, you're getting their input into what those solutions would be. So what time would work best for them during the day for gaming? What time would work best for you? Find a time that works for both of you, kind of thing. In our house, a lot of times it was kind of like the rocks you put in a jar. We had things that had to be done. We had to go to homeschool classes or sleepovers or lessons, and then game time was filler. So while I'm getting ready, they can go do something on screens or things like that. So parents come up with very ingenious ways to do that. So yeah, good luck.
I would also, if you could you elaborate a little bit on when he goes on screens at 3:30? Is this for watching something or is it gaming? Would you be open to sharing a little bit more? You can even type in the chat if you want to. What is it that he loves doing on screens at that time?
Just about anything. Usually it's because his friends who go to school are home then, and then they can do their online games together. But really it's anything screen related.
Okay. And then is it just open time from 3:30 on, or is there a time limit on that? Or I'm just trying to get some context around that question.
No, aside from the 3:30 start, we have very few limits.
Okay. And then do you guys use screens very much during the day in learning?
A little bit for videos, but not a ton.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that. Thanks for the explanation. Yeah, I agree as well. As maybe if it's something that, he's really, I get the wanted to connect with friends, especially for that time of gaming. That's a big thing as well. So the excitement of having that interaction is definitely something to look forward to. I think, that also might be part of the excitement of waiting for that time to come as well, right? I know with my daughter, they've had like regular gaming evenings. And so once a lot of her friends that go to school are part of these gaming evenings. So it is like waiting for everyone to get back from home from school and to finish their stuff so they can begin. And then they can have their evening hanging out together gaming. So she gets very excited for that because otherwise most of them are in school during the daytime. So it's definitely something to look forward to. It's an anticipation, which is also really nice too, which sometimes it's sharing in that anticipation with them, that that's something they have to look forward to. And oh, that's going to be, actually engaging by sharing in the anticipation is also opening up the opportunity to engage in conversation with them, so that you can also talk about it with them, and then in that way be part of it with them. And I think that's something as well that we have an opportunity with, is instead of it being they're doing screen time and we're completely separate from them, and still a chance for us to be engaged in their world of learning, because screen time is still a world of learning for them. So if we are taking an interest in what they're doing or asking about what they're watching or what they're involved in, sometimes then it's kind of an invitation as well to be part of that too, which is nice. And then it gives us perspective, and it also honors them in what they're enjoying and wanting to do. And sometimes that gives a bit of a different framework or different way for us to engage with our kids in that way. Then it becomes less about us against them, and it's us working together with them. And I find then the flow and rhythm with we're just working together, and it just seems to kind of go a little bit easier then as well. That would be one of my suggestions. And then, that's the same. I think it's similar with Golda and Judy. For us, we usually just say, there's things that we know that for each of our kids that they need during the day, just for health and wellness. And so we're, just having your time to move and exercise or fresh air, whatever else you have to do in the day, and supporting them in that. And sometimes it is, being in conversation with them, and if they have all of their needs met and things like that, then okay, you have open time, maybe a little bit earlier you can go on the screens today and enjoy, or an extra time, or really having them a part of that process as well, so that they also take ownership. And I know for that age is getting close to that time when they definitely want to be taking more ownership and having more say, right? And control, I guess, really, you can say. So yeah, it's good to have them as part of the conversation and hear, you know, how are you feeling about this? What are you enjoying, and how can maybe, you know, we can all work together to best support you during that time as well, and see how they can keep engaging with you. I think that's the biggest thing, is helping to keep them engaged with you and part of that ongoing conversation. I don't know, I hope that helps too, but yeah, those are some of the things that we found in our home that works well.
I just wanted to add something too, because I think something that's complicated this was the pandemic, because it's really lonely to be homeschooling this year for the very first time. And I think that the draw to screen time is sometimes a draw to social time, very, very strongly. And it is a human need that we have. I mean, we're all here because we want to learn from each other, but we're also here because this is my social time. I don't know about you guys, but it's hard to not have that. I don't know if you live somewhere where it's impossible to go out, but it is here impossible. And so we found the kids in this area are really drawn to screen time this year, especially because they need to talk to other people, and that's the compelling, like, it's like an inward drive that they need. So I would just want to add that, because I've seen that quite a lot.
Yeah, Golda and I live very remotely as well. So yeah, so it's for us, it's good to go online as well and interact when we can, for sure. Okay, are there any other questions on that point, or should we move to the next question? That sound good? Okay, so the next question is I have a question. I'm a teacher recently that left the classroom and really interested in unschooling from a teaching perspective. I don't have children, but I'm passionate about education. What's been the biggest benefit of unschooling? Do you see a place for ex-teachers in helping families who unschool? Golda, I think this is a perfect question for you to start out with.
I am an well, I wouldn't say ex-teacher, because I'm still certified as a teacher, but that was my question a few years ago, actually. So I think let's start with the biggest benefit of unschooling, because I've seen this myself. I've seen kids who are in school who are having a terrible time. Their parents take them out mid-year. I talk them into unschooling, and a month later, maybe 3 months later, their child's engaged, interested in learning, and they're excited about it. And they go from the first meeting, like with their arms crossed, glaring out from under their hoodie at me, to the second meeting, them being actively engaged in the conversation, making eye contact and interested. And I think the major benefit of unschooling is that kids and people are excited about learning when they are self-directed. I have myself gone down rabbit holes of things because I get interested in something and I can't stop learning. And that's another benefit. When someone's interested in learning something, you can't stop them from learning it. It's like, it's a compelling thing. It's a very human thing, actually. And so I think one of the things that I've seen is kids going from hating learning, saying it's boring, to being very excited about it, because they can direct their own learning. So, and there is a way to get involved in unschooling. It depends on where you live, though, because not all places have facilitators that help, but I guess it depends on where you're from. Anybody else want to comment on that? I don't know what else to say. That's a good question. And
Judy, did you want to go next, or?
Sure. I think the biggest advantage of unschooling. Sorry, can I ask everyone to mute, please?
Starting time, and
you can mute them as well, Judy, too.
The rest of the day to help you focus on it.
You just go to.
I got my screen set for grid.
Okay.
Just because I'm recording on my screen. Can you mute everybody? Do you have that? Oh,
I'm not a host, so I can't.
Oh my gosh.
Such as
Well, we'll
We don't
change
give a start
that.
time. We let him go on whenever he wants, but he's only allowed a certain amount of time in a day. So
Okay, here we go. Okay.
Sorry
we
about that.
It's okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Everybody should be co-hosts now. Okay, I would say the biggest advantage is there's no motivation problems in unschooling. And I have 61 more advantages in my book, which encompass academic benefits, social benefits, emotional benefits, and also physical benefits, even from just simply getting more sleep in the day for teenagers, growing their brain. But there's a lot of benefits to unschooling. But I think the biggest one is you're not fighting with children to learn what things they don't want to learn. And you're empowering them to learn things they do want to learn. Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree. I agree with all of those benefits as well. I can also speak to right now, I'm seeing a lot of lately, and I've actually been in discussions with some grown unschoolers. And as my son is going to be 15, and he is looking out into adulthood and what he wants to do, getting ready to leave the home. And I think the benefit of unschooling that has seemed to come up quite a bit in conversation lately is that the time that you have to explore your interests. And he's had the chance to explore things he's loved for a long time now and really deep dive into it and spend a lot of hours and days into it. And because of that, he has, that 10,000 hour things that, Malcolm Gladwell talks about, if you have 10,000 hours, you're an expert. So think about having that time, those hours already clocked in or put in when you're from the age of 6 or from the age of 10. So now that he's 14, turning 15, he's doing things that many adults that we know are just starting to do or learn. And he's getting ready to pursue a career or an interest already now that I think he'll be pretty active in once he leaves the home, when he's already, at the age of 16, 17, 18. The nice thing about that is just like any of us as adults, we don't always stay in the same career for all our lives. I know I've changed careers and moved in different things. I know many people that have. And I was speaking with another grown unschooler the other day, and she said she was really into music. And she was actually a trained singer, an operatic singer. And from the age of 9, she was just full on into music. So by the time she was 20 and she was in university and she was studying music, she realized, she was like, you know what? I've already had my career in music. She was getting to the point where she would have had to travel full time, and she didn't want to do that anymore. And she said, she felt like she had done it already. And so she had the experience that she was able to move into a different sector of the industry. And then she already had so many years of that she had done and immersed herself in, that she was able to do that very seamlessly and with a lot of experience and knowledge. And she says that she was able to do that because she had already spent so much time doing that unschooling, which was a great benefit for her. So, I think she's on her 4th career iteration now. But she's, she feels like she's had a full life because of that and been able to pursue her interests and get really, really good at them. So I think that's a really nice thing about a big benefit about unschooling. That's just one thing. There are many things. And also the flexibility of schedule and, do sleep and travel and, when things are open, go to things even for homeschoolers, when everyone else is in school and, you get museums all to yourself, or you get any places all to yourself, or, and yeah, there's many, many benefits, but that's one big one we're also seeing right now within our family. Oh, the one other thing I was going to say is biggest benefit for ex-teachers. There's many agile learning centers and self-directed communities opening up right now. I see it all over the world. And I know of many people all over that are really trying to engage and get that going within their communities worldwide. And there's a lot of teachers that have left the school system that are involved in that too. Microschooling is another thing as well, that a few teachers I've seen that have started microschools. So there's definitely different ways that ex-teachers are supporting unschooling and self-directed learning. So yeah, it's a bright future. I think it's wonderful. Okay, so I can move to the next question. Can you guys share online resources your kids have found engaging and useful? For example, my son has discovered codingville.ca and is enjoying that game style of learning. Okay, and I see Golda had written in there a few: Scratch for coding, prodigygame.com for math. A great video game for language arts is Scribblenauts. There's a site full of resources here on Golda's website, demystifyingeducation.com/resources. Someone else had added Khan Academy is also great. Yes, with tutorials for self-paced learning. Are there any other ones that you'd like to add, Judy and Golda? I know we use Khan a lot in our house. My kids like Khan. If you're looking for game style of learning, what are some other, I usually say like Minecraft is a great one. Video games, there's some great video games that are historically based too, if you're looking for that. There's actually quite a few now, and even more that are being created. My kids used to really like Storybird, but that was more for creative writing, where the artists supply the pictures and then they can write the stories along with them. What else? Judy, I know you have a whole ton of lists, so you please add more to this.
I do, but if you look at the theory of unschooling, though, everything a child looks at on a screen is educational. And we don't really, in our house, we don't distinguish between educational resources online and everything that's not considered educational, and I have been very good at claiming video games. My kids have a Steam library of 500 games. I've claimed them under for reimbursement because all of them are educational. There is nothing out there that doesn't teach kids something. When they go on Reddit and argue with somebody, they are honing their debating skills. They're being pressed to supply sources for their opinions. Everything could be educational. It doesn't have to be packaged as such. So that's kind of me. So I don't know half the things my kids were on. And that's the trust. I trust that if they stumble across something that they find offensive or traumatic, they come to me and we talk about it. So yeah, that's kind of our house. That's what we've done.
And mine, I help people write home education plans for the year, sometimes in my job as a facilitator. And we often talk about video games and online resources being like, there's some things that I didn't even know. One parent was telling, so my daughter used to play this game called Animal Crossing. And I did not realize that you have to like mortgage your house and then you have to pay it off by doing odd jobs. It's actually like real life, that game. And the math that went into it is just incredible. Like, so I always ask them, for one of the first questions is, do you play video games? Because if they do, I know how to write, we're going to be writing that plan, or we're at least going to incorporate some of those sources. And it's not just about it being educational, because Animal Crossing is not advertised like an educational resource, but it is. And most of the video games that I've seen are like, there's some learning. There's math because they have this unique money system on the game, or there's some kind of building. So they're building spatial awareness. So they're figuring out science concepts that they might not be explicitly learning, like that they could write it down, but they're learning and they don't forget those kinds of things. So I think there's tons of resources, both video games and online, that are not just making learning gamified, but also games that teach things that you're not even aware of. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes as well, Well, this is what I usually do, and it makes it actually quite easy. Is I asked my kids what they're playing or other new ones that they've heard of, and they usually know a whole ton, and then they show me how to play it or what to do, and usually can realize pretty quickly, like Golda was talking about with Animal Crossing or any other games, what learning is involved with it. There was one lately my kids found. GeoGuessr is the one they're really into right now. Like they're really, and I think they were watching a YouTuber talk about GeoGuessr, and then they started playing GeoGuessr, and they play it like for hours. And it was when we got the free account, and then I noticed how much they loved it. So I pay for a subscription now because they can have unlimited time playing it. And it's a map. They show you a Google map of anywhere in the world, and you have to guess where it is. And it's timed, and you can look around and get clues, but then you can also play on teams with other people that are playing at the same time in the world and see who gets it first, and then you get points, and your points get added up to your membership. And then there's another guy who's a GeoGuessr master. I can't remember his name, but he does have like a geo something name that they just watch him on YouTube because he's so good at guessing those places. And like that has been, I'm like, holy cow, the amount of conversation and geography and mapping and map reading and observation, being able to notice the little things to understand where a place is. And it's places like, I don't know, there'll be Canada focused ones, Manitoba, wherever. I'm thinking about people from Manitoba in here today, but there's, odd ones in, I think there was one in Libya one time, and, different places that really otherwise we might not have exposure to. So, yeah. I'll move on to the next question. So Melissa, can you discuss your thoughts? Sorry about that. I'm trying not to read names out loud here. Can you discuss your thoughts or any research you know of on shooting games or more violent games for younger children? I allow my oldest to play them, but I limit it for my younger two that are 6 and 8 years old. They are very interested in them though. Okay. Who is going to go first answering this one? Nobody saying anything? Would you like me to go first? Okay, then. Thoughts on that. I think it's really personal. My kids do play shooter games, and we've never really told them that they couldn't play it. But I also have a son who's a big hunter. So he's had, for example, from a young age, shooting games, like hunting games, hunting dinosaurs or hunting game. And it ended up actually being great practice for the skills he uses outdoors right now. So maybe, so for that, I guess the other thing as well is a lot of times, we're in the room while they're playing games. So we know what it's involved. We know what's going on. My two kids play together. My daughter does play them as well, like Halo, but Fortnite, you could still consider that a shooting game, really. And they love it. But I'm trying to think if my kids played at 6 or 8 years old. I think they played Wii more at that time. And we also lived in a lot of places where we just didn't have access to video games at the time we were traveling. But maybe I'm not the right person to answer it, because I know Judy always has great brain data, if you want to talk about that too, Judy. But really for my kids, it's pretty open with that. And we just found from my son, shooting games, it hasn't illy affected them in that way. And then my son has usually been drawn to games that then he uses within his real life hunting and scouting. So they've actually proven pretty useful to him in that way. So Judy or Golda?
I thought Judy was going to start talking, so I didn't. I limited my son when he was younger, but I came from a family, so I think this is based on my own values. I did read research actually on both sides. I read research saying that you shouldn't let your children play violent video games because it will lead them to being violent. And then I read other research that says that's not true. There's no evidence. So reading the research didn't really help me very much. And I guess I had to go with my own values. My mother wouldn't even let us watch cartoons because she thought they were violent. So Sylvester and Tweety were violent in our house. So I mean, I had to go from that to being comfortable with him playing Fortnite. So there's, you know, I've made some compromises and I've changed my values because he's really drawn to that stuff. He likes those games. I think part of the reason he likes those games is because a lot of them are very social. Actually, they have to communicate with each other. So they have to plan and they have to know where they are each are on the map, for example, or they, you know, there's some things about that I think it's not the violence that they're drawn to. It's actually the other part that we don't understand unless we're playing them too. So, but I'll let Judy answer because she's the brain research expert here.
Yeah, so, okay, I'll come clean. My kids were playing violent video games anywhere from 6 to 8 because my husband brought them home. And I remember when he played them. So he would play Doom or, you know, StarCraft, which wasn't that bad back then. But, and then the kids would watch to see what dad's playing and they'd want to play. So I was like, oh, do you have to? Can you wait till they're in bed? So, we were really good for the older kids. We tried to, they were 6 to 8, but then the younger ones are watching what their older teen brothers are playing. So my youngest, he was 3, and he was fascinated watching my oldest play Grand Theft Auto. And we called it the car game. And I asked my oldest, I said, okay, you got to wear headphones because he can't hear all that swearing. And he did, but so then other homeschooling moms would ask me, oh, your son was telling my son about this car game. What is it? It sounds like fun. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want to tell you what it is. I can't tell you. But okay, brains. So brains, this is the brain. And this is the preschooler part of the brain, the parietal lobe. And that's where kids really get into make-believe. And at this age, so age 3 to 5, they don't really know the difference between violence on a screen or violence. It scares them. It can be very hard for them. So definitely know your kids. They're, you know, if they're very sensitive about dogs or car washes, or they have fears. They have a lot of fears at that age. And that might not be the best time to let them play violent games. The frontal cortex is this part, and this is where kids start getting higher order thinking skills and reasoning. So about age 6 to 12, right? And then the teen prefrontal cortex is here. But 6 to 12, they're starting to understand that it's pretend. It is pretend. And I noticed that with my kids too. They would play a lot of violent games back then. Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, Team Fortress. You know, you might know those older games. Now they play PUBG. But I remember they play that, and then I took them fishing at Callaway Park, which was this park thing in Calgary, and they caught a fish, and then the park people, they were very careful. They would kill the fish out of sight, like under the table, right? And kind of bang it under the table. And my kids saw that and they were horrified. They were horrified that you had to kill the fish if you go fishing. So then it reassured me that, you know, they know the difference between violence on a screen, which is can be animated, it's pretend violence, but also violence in real life. If kids grow up in a very predictable, calm, nurturing home, they're going to be fine no matter how many violent video games they play. That's what the brain research is. But again, you know your child best, you know how they react. I remember taking my 11-year-old to see the Hunger Games, and he didn't sleep for 3 weeks. Big mistake. Although my other kids were okay at 11 watching things like that. So you know your child best, and and just kind of understand where they're at. But rest assured, about age 6 to 8, they start to know that violence on a screen is not violence in real life, and they know the difference.
Thank you very much. That's funny because my son was the same. We tried to watch Hunger Games one night as a family. He couldn't make it through half the movie, and then he had nightmares for the next week and a half. So yeah, it's really interesting. But, you know, he would play video games too and was okay, but he could not watch Hunger Games. Okay, so the next question is Thalasi and Graham. We have a question, but it's easier. I said it out loud because, sorry, I have to remember not to say names again, but I have a question. Yes, so you know it's you. Please ask.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, I just didn't want to type this all out. So for me and screens, our kids are 5 and 7, just for context. It's not so much that I don't trust them. I think it's really cool to watch them on their screens and see what they get up to. It's more, even as an adult, I don't really trust the stuff on the screens. I do a lot when I'm on an app store or on YouTube or Netflix or social media. I'm really aware of how algorithms and advertising and the whole attention economy is trying to direct my attention. And it's not a neutral playing ground where someone can just, you know, explore their passions. There's lots of other things going on. And I feel like I have done a lot of things to make sure that I'm using the technology in the way that I want to use it rather than the technology using me. And so I'm curious about the stuff that you've said about kids starting to self-limit on their own, self-regulate around the emotional experience of the technology and the screens, and whether there's like an age range when that happens. And how that happens and what the role of parents are in that. Because I don't think it's like, is technology good or bad, screens good or bad, internet good or bad? It's more like, how can you use it to do the things that you want to do? That's my main question. I don't know if there's anything you'd add. Okay, so that's the question.
Okay, who's going first? Great question. Fantastic question. Judy, did you want to? Judy sometimes has her brain videos. Did you bring your screens? And it's always great when you bring that out because it's so, the visual there and the explanation that you give is so clear.
Okay. Okay. I do want to talk about self-regulation. So I have recorded a webinar on the science of screen time, and it's going to be at unschoolingtouniversity.com sometime. But let's talk about self-regulation, because a lot of parents say, oh, can you see the screen, by the way, everybody?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. You can see Bradley Cooper there.
Yes. Yeah. Are you able to make it so we just see the slide instead of the rest of? Sorry to be picky or anything. If not, that's okay. But
sure, I can go full screen. Oh, my taskbar is in the way here. Okay.
That's okay. We can still see Bradley Cooper.
Like this, you mean? No? Oh. Okay.
Yes,
now.
like that. Yes, exactly like that.
All right. So here's my question to you. Is screen addiction caused by lack of willpower or by brain impairment? And this is from the Brain Story course, which is a really good free course for anyone who wants to look at addictions and how it manifests in the brain. But really, the answer to this is it's not caused by lack of willpower, it's caused by brain impairment. And more importantly, by the circuitry of brains and how they develop in childhood. So, we all have genes. Genes are hereditary. Our children have our genes. We can pass along a propensity for addiction in our genes, right? But so I could have an addiction gene and pass it along to my children. But whether those genes are expressed or not depends on their stress level and the environment they live in. So it's an interplay between nature and nurture. What the research shows is about 5% of the population does have that gene for addiction, But whether it's activated or not we're pretty well sure it depends on their number of ACEs, their adverse childhood experiences while growing up. And ACEs is what impairs brain circuitry. So ACEs are they are stress. They're called toxic stress. And I'll tell you, here are the 10 ACEs right here. So so whenever I talk about parenting, it really doesn't matter if you're an attachment parent, a authoritarian parent, or a free range parent, unschooling parent, or whatever. Doesn't matter. Those nuances really doesn't affect your child's brain. This list of 10 parenting no-nos does affect your child's brain. And this is what I call my list of 10 no-nos. So the 10 no-nos are either abuse or neglect. So it's emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, witnessing abuse in the home before the age of 18. It's non-attachment with caregivers or constant criticism. It's witnessing untreated mental illness occurring in the home, witnessing addiction, having a parent absence, either through jail or somewhere else, just leaving, neglect of basic needs, and a separation or divorce. Now, one of these by itself does not affect brain architecture. But two of them isn't even bad either. But once you get three of these together, and a lot of times it does happen together, say it's a high conflict divorce and there's abuse in that relationship, and then there's also addiction. There you have three ACEs. That child growing up can probably is at risk of having their brain circuitry affected, right? And then that one of the outcomes of that is propensity to addictions. So what this says is, in a normal, nurturing family environment, a child can have unlimited amount of screen time, whether it's video games or social media, and not have an addiction. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. So in a normal, nurturing, predictable, calm family environment, a child could have absolute unlimited amount of screen time and not develop an addiction. Okay, these are the 10 types of addictions. There's substance addictions and process addictions. And the research right now is saying that internet gaming addictions tends to have characteristics most close to gambling right here. But there's not enough good research studies out there. There's got to be a lot more long-time research. But what this does is when children or adults feel stress, they're under stress, they need to engage in their addictions so that the dopamine hit released by their brain calms down the stress response. And that's all addictions is, right? So if someone is under stress, say your child is 16, going through exams, under stress, if they choose a healthier something that gives them a dopamine hit, maybe going out for a jog or exercising gives them some dopamine, that's a good way to respond to stress other than these more harmful ways, right? So I'm just gonna look at where's my brain? Okay, here's my brain. So when do kids start self-regulating? The big leap is from about age 3 to 5, but they're not very good self-regulators there. It's still very hit and miss there. But the final leap is from age 13. So that prefrontal cortex, that final development of executive function here, from 13 to age 25. So you can expect your 13-year-old, so around grade 7, 8, to have a bit more self-control and put gaming and screen time on hold in order to get other things done. Where this really, really, really kicks in is about age 17. I'm just looking for my picture of the brain. Yeah, here we go. So this graph shows you the development of that prefrontal cortex and self-control. You can see here from age 13 to 25 is where it develops the most. And 17 is where this final leap takes place. And myself, I have recognized this in my own 5 children, is that around age 16, 17, even without parenting, they develop a natural sense of self-control and self-regulation. It kicks in. And like I said, I've witnessed this when they're in university and they have exams coming up or they have a term paper to do. They'll say no to their friends. No, I can't play D&D this week. I got to do this. And it's kind of funny because I said to my kids once, I said, why is it that all the games manufacturers bring out their best games during exam time, like spring break, right around Easter? And my kids said back to me, well, why is it that the university schedule exams during the game time? It's like, okay. But that is when you can expect to see very good self-control in a child that's grown up in a normal, nurturing, non-chaotic environment to naturally kick in around age 17. Does that make sense? Back to us.
And maybe Judy, we can talk about as well the other part of the question, which also talks about, because I know, Judy, you and I have had this conversation before about like data and privacy and also the internet, how how really, I guess it's really AI has come to the point where it essentially directs all the information that we're receiving. I think some understand the how far it has come now. Maybe some don't understand that, and how, especially even understanding with brain development, how our kids can understand that. I know I've had that conversation with my kids. We've talked about how, for example, on YouTube, of course, my son, certain videos are going to be directed to him that I see because he's watching certain things, where I know my daughter was not watching that. It would be because of, the algorithm has calculated that this is what my son is going to be watching, or that what will be in his queue to watch. With my daughter with social media, that's the other thing as well, is, talking about what's real, what you see in front of you on your screen, and really what goes on behind the screen. I know sometimes we've watched that new movie on Netflix, the social media one that talks about, I can't remember the name of it right now. We watched that and talked about it. It was also interesting because to hear my kids' viewpoint, because at the same time, in some ways they understood it, but there was a bit of, they were kind of like, well, that won't happen to me. Or, they were kind of like, but that's okay. I'll be okay, or it won't happen to me, when, understanding that there still is a connection that happens to me as an adult when I don't always realize it too. So there is definitely, I think, a huge conversation, an important ongoing conversation to have. My husband and I just had it this morning and I know Judy, because we've talked about this as adults, and her kids that are really work in this industry, and they understand it too. And because there's also a separate industry happening where it is, I'm trying to explain the words of it, where basically it's anonymous too, right? There's other platforms happening where it is, it's encrypted, where it is open source, where all of that data and information gathering is not there. So
it's, it's nice. I think the whole thing is to have open conversations with your kids all the time, right? And I always say, don't punish your kids. That's a big reason to not punish your kids, because that shuts down communication. That you want to have an open door policy, that if your kids ask any questions, they can come to you and talk to you about it, whether they're bullied online or whether they found an objectionable picture that they can't get rid of out of their mind. They need to talk to someone, and you're their biggest lifeline to do that. And so it was good. Like my kids, I'm sure they went into the dark web at 13. I'm sure, we had conversations about porn, and also why, and also when you have those conversations, you can add your values into there. I can say, well, I don't like porn because I don't think it represents a relationship very well, and here's why, blah, 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 blah. So we have a lot of table conversations over things like that, right? So, and it's good because they get to know your values, but ultimately we're parenting them to live in this digital world, right? By the age of 18, when they go off to college somewhere, you have no control over what they watch, how they see things, how they buy things. We have to give them our best knowledge before 18. And at age 13, you're 2/3 of the way there, right? Like 12, actually, you're 2/3 of the way there. So these are your best years to impart your values, but also answer their questions about everything. My biggest addict, the kid that was playing games 16 hours a day, he loved computers. He found my email for sale on the dark web, and he's constantly nagging us, "Mom, change your passwords," which is all this good stuff. And as a result of him, I think all my 5 kids are not on social media. Like, I have more friends than my 5 kids combined. It's terrible. But in a way, it's good too, right? To be aware. And I think Golda and Robin, you have great relationships with your kids where you have a lot of conversations. It's the conversations in the car. It's not the talk. It's many, many, many talks, right?
Yeah, it's that one conversation at a time thing that my superintendent keeps talking about all the time. I think I actually had this issue with my own son because there's an open line of communication about those things. He came to me and said, something's wrong with my TikTok. So he was watching TikTok, and the algorithm had slid into more and more violent content as he went along, and to the point where he was upset by it. So he stopped watching TikTok, and that was his decision. And he's 12, because he said that there was that he could tell that they were leading him into something that he didn't want to see. And it's the same with YouTube, can do the same thing, although they're a little bit more, they monitor a little bit more on YouTube, I think, what's allowed to be shown. But I agree that the most important thing is to have a good relationship with your child so that they can come and tell you when they're upset by something. And I know that the web is starting to become more and more leading us down, especially leading us into becoming more and more consuming more and more stuff. So it's just a matter of letting them know, and you want to arm them too, because this isn't probably going to get better. It's probably going to get worse. And so we have to arm our children too. So I think part of our job as parents is to educate them about how things are working, so that when they're old enough, they can, and they're on their own and they're making their own decisions. It's just like with anything, with drugs, with alcohol, with any issue that they might have in the future. You want to have conversations about it so that they are armed with knowledge as they're going into their adult life. So that's kind of where I go with that one.
Yeah, I agree. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, I definitely agree about the open conversation. We've talked about porn, drinking, drugs. Yeah, it's always an ongoing conversation for sure. And what's behind the scenes and what you see in front as well. Yeah. My daughter had a chance to go on a photo shoot with me the other weekend. It was actually just for a job we had been hired for Alberta Tourism. And at the end of the day, she was like, "Can we go home?" It was behind the scenes of, because they said, "Oh, those will be on Instagram and there'll be a video and all that sort of stuff." But it was like 14 hours of hard work to put in. And after she was just kind of like, okay, she realized, right, for little snippets of something, how much actually goes into it with lighting and clothing and styling and, you know, redoing something over and over and over again. And she hasn't even seen the edited process yet, you know, how much work actually goes in to make it look a certain way. So, you know, that was actually a really good experience for her to see and understand that too. So the next question we'll move to is Shannon. I'm the teacher in New Zealand. Hello, and searching for homeschooling communities in my area. I would recommend just Facebook is a great way to connect with homeschooling communities. I know there is a big, what's her name? There's a big unschooler in New Zealand that lives in a yurt. I can't remember her name right now, and I know she has a fairly big community as well. And because I know someone else from New Zealand that homeschools, it says, I think she usually has an annual or speaks at an annual unschooling event in New Zealand. So there's definitely a community there, I know for sure. Just search that out online. And if you have, Shannon, you can DM me and I can,
Hi guys.
I can connect you as
It's
well.
okay. Okay.
Hi. There we go. That happens. Hey.
Yeah.
Judy, how do we get your book? And Golda posted your site. All right. And Judy, also you put libraries, Amazon. I have a 2 books for 1 special right now. Oh, wonderful. So if you're looking to get a book from Judy, she has a 2 for 1 special, and Judy's email is in the chat, jarnall@shaw.ca. Okay. So the next question is, our girls are 6 and 8. We're struggling. What we're struggling is finding interesting activities that are not screen-based. The screen-based activities are super stimulating and make non-screen-based activities seem rather boring in comparison. What are some non-screen-based activities that we could suggest to our girls that your kids were interested at this age? Okay.
I have that same problem myself with the VR. Actually, my son got a VR for Christmas, and you're in a totally different world, and then you take it off and you're like, oh, I'm back here again. It's always a little bit of a letdown. I guess my son got interested in certain things over time. Like he got interested in natural medicine, and he'd be out there in the spring hunting for roots and stuff to mush up in the kitchen. He got interested in baking, so he actually taught himself how to bake. We had a few things that had too much butter in it or whatever, but he tried. He was determined to do that by himself. So I guess that's the answer. And sometimes screen time can actually like leap into that, because he got interested in that because I had bought him an app called Jam, and it had a cooking for kids thing. So he was watching that, and then he wanted to go and do it. So that was my answer. But I have the same problem with screen time my own self, so I understand.
So some things I had with my kids that age were, I made a list actually, well, but dolls, the girls would play with dolls. We sewing, so having a sewing machine, a bucket of scraps, a little workshop center set up where they could build things, just nails and boards and hammers. They were really into board games, so we still have 3 bookshelves of board games in our living room, and we still play them all through the teen years. Sunday night is board game night, so tonight we're playing board games again, right? So music, having an instrument or something they could play music, sports equipment, maybe a bike, balls, things like that, or badminton rackets. Paint was, and crafts were big in our house, so we kept the craft cupboard. It's still there in our house. I'm saving it for my grandkids, but anything you find at crafts, like pipe cleaners, paints, crayons, you name it, just put it in your craft bucket and bring it out, and they might want to build something. Lego and building toys, so Lego, Meccano, K'NEX, very open-ended. They played with that until at least age 14. Gardening, getting outside, gardening, trampoline, kitchen too, yeah, baking, cooking. and manipulative. So you can go to a teacher's store and they have really cool things to play with, like pattern blocks and things that really bring home math skills, but in 3-dimension, right? Rather than workbooks. I think the more kids can learn through activities is best. Remember a few years ago, there was this whole game called Second Life. Remember? And people would go play Second Life, and their game in the Second Life world was so much more fun. They didn't want to come back to their real life. But I mean, that's faded away. People are still in real life. So I think AI is still new, it's fun, but it's also, I think, going to wear out. People still want to connect with other people in real life. And I think we don't have to worry about that. For kids, yeah, I mean, their biggest thing is, I'm bored, right? And really, if you have a lot of things around your house they could do, unfortunately, a lot of parents pack away the messy stuff when kids go to school, so they don't have these things. But go to garage sales, pick things up that you think your kids might want to do, a 500-piece puzzle or something like that. There's always things they can do. And like you said, Golda, when my kids played video games, it spurred them to do other things. Like they watch Kirby and Yoshi, and Pokemon was big. And then they would write Pokemon stories. They couldn't write yet, so they would draw the pictures of the story, and I would fill in all the storyline. They wrote tons of that. They sewed Kirby costumes and little dolls and things. So very creative stuff. They colored. They made paintings of Kirby and Zelda and Mario. So there's lots to do at that age.
Yeah, if I can jump in, is it okay if I jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. I kept nodding my head when Judy was talking. We have a 5-year-old, and you're so right. It's just, and I'm an educator too, but now I'm doing unschooling full time. And Sammy has just everything. I mean, he woke up this morning, he was big into Legos. He's been working with Legos since probably 8 o'clock this morning. And then he and his dad just finished spending about 2 hours trying to create this Hello Carrier for the Avengers or something for the last few hours. He's into painting. We have our art studio in the kitchen. I'm the mom that brought the sandbox in, in the winter time and put it in the kitchen, because I'm like, he's got to continue with the sandbox, in the winter time. He's got arts and crafts. He's big into volcanoes and the planets now. And when it comes to screen time, what I find myself doing is, if there's an interest, which the planets, then I'm calling the library up. And I'm like, what do you have for books for a 5-year-old? And they're telling me, and I'm like, honey, I'm going to run to the library. They're going to bring the books out because of COVID. I'm coming home and I'm making a big scene. Look at these books that I got from the library about planets, whatever. We do lots and lots of reading during the day. We'll make volcano cakes. We'll build volcanoes. I mean, everything is just so hands-on. When it is screen time, I might say something, well, you know what? Let's look at volcanoes and do some research and see what's out there in YouTube. And he's like, yeah, let's do that. And so we find ourselves doing that. Then there are times that he may just want to do something else on the laptop. And I'm like, fine, do that. But I'm always kind of monitoring it to make sure it's okay. And if I see that it's a bit too much, I'm like, Sammy, in about 10 more minutes, I think we're going to probably stop with the screen time or stop with the iPad and do something else. And he's like, okay, Ma, he'll just close it. And then he'll watch his movies, of course, as well. So again, I find if you just really just immerse them in so many other things, puzzles, Legos, hands-on painting, you name it, drawing, going outside. But before you know it, the day is over. You don't even have enough time for screen time. But if you do use screen time, have it pertaining to what they're really interested in. And I think you can't go wrong with that.
So you said when it is screen time, so that implies that you limit the screen time. What kind of like limits do you impose?
When we have screen time and I limit it?
Yeah, because you said when it is screen time. So does that mean that you limit their screen time? Or?
It means that if he wants to do it, then I try to not always say no. And if I say yes, I'll see kind of like just about how much is too much. I kind of like just get a sense of, okay, he's been on there for 45 minutes or an hour. And I'm like, okay, Sammy, about 10 more minutes, we're going to stop and do something else. And he pretty much knows, okay, I've got to get myself ready for that. If that answers your question.
Yeah, because I think the thing is, we've got all these things, right? The bikes, the trampoline, the garden, the arts and crafts, the sewing machine. We've got all that stuff, but it gets forgotten as soon as we take the limits of a screen time. Then when we kind of like do like this like pendulum swing, right? And as soon as you then limit it, you see all those things being played with again, and actually they have a lot of fun. And so I think that's where we really struggle, is because they just are not drawn to those things if they can, just spend all their time playing a Pokemon game or, watching gamers on Twitch or doing that. So it just seems to be like abandoned when they are allowed to just sit on the computer.
Well, with Sammy, he's not doing any like gaming at all yet. It's he knows it's either Kidopia, which is some academic program. It's either YouTube for research. We use the word research a lot. So it's like, okay, you have an interest in this, let's research it on the computer. Or we'll read a book, for example, about Olivia Goes to Venice. Let's research riding a gondola in Venice along the canal. Like, it's got to be something that pretty much pertains to what he's already doing outside the screen, and then we'll do the screen. But when it comes time to me saying inside my head, I think it's a bit too much, I'm going to make it as exciting as possible. Hey, Sammy, 10 more minutes on the screen time. We're going to bake a cake. We're going to make a banana pie. And he's like, really? And so I try my best to just make it so exciting for him that he still gets excited, and he's like all for it.
And I if I could just also point out too, and I think one thing that Leslie is saying that I've also helped as well, has helped in our home is just being engaged with them. And instead of expecting my kids to go and do it on their own, sometimes it's just being part of that activity. So if they're making that volcano, I'm like, I'll help. Let's get all the materials out. What kind, like, why don't you guys choose what you want it to look like and what you want, and then I'll help you get whatever you need for that. And if you need help, let me know. I'll be right here. And just making sure I'm present and available, maybe not doing it for them, but just being present and just watching and engaging in the conversation. Or, if they're baking something, or just something, even it's maybe they're baking a cake for their grandparents' birthday, or, it's got to the point where now everyone in the family, actually, if it is a birthday, they ask my kids to bake for the birthday cake kind of thing, right? So, it's also being engaged in the activity with them as well. So it's an activity that we're all doing together and that we're all enjoying. And it's not just us, my husband and I are saying, okay, now you have to get off the screen. And then we hope you go find something else as well too. It's something that we kind of start the day being engaged together with as well, if that helps. But that's one thing I hear you saying a lot as well, Leslie, is that you're part of that activity too. Especially as they're younger, it helps because they might have, I know my daughter says, but I would love to do this, but I just don't know how to get started, or I don't know what to do with this. This would be really interesting, but where do I go from here? And she might have needed just that little bit of support to keep going.
I think I often ask parents, when I hear parents, they say, okay, it's time to get off now. But a lot of times parents, if a child's reading a book for 2 hours, they wouldn't say, okay, it's time to stop reading now. I think there's a little bit of a values difference between gaming and other what looks like academic things, right? So be mindful of, why do you want to put limits on? And most parents, when I bring this up in parents groups, they're worried that they want a variety of activities for the children, right? Which is good. And I think that's a great suggestion, Robin. I found most success when I negotiated time limits before the kids started, right? So if they knew they only had an hour before we had to go out somewhere, then they wouldn't play something that they have to keep, doing that's not constrained within an hour. So negotiating time limits before they start is good. If you have a very busy day, talk to your kids and say, it's not going to be a lot of gaming today. Or maybe it's the third day of nonstop gaming and you think, I really feel we need to get some exercise, right? So that's another reason for limits is exercise. Currently, the recommendations in the Canadian Pediatric Society and the American Academy of Pediatrics is no screen time under age 2. And in Canada, it's only 1 hour a day for under age 5. It's a little more lax in the US. They've buckled under the public pressure a bit more. And then for school-age children, so for ages 6, it's just moderation. Keep everything in moderation. So make sure kids have enough physical activity during the day. And for ages 6 to 12, children should have at least 30 minutes of vigorous activity a day and at least 1 to 3 hours of moderate activity and play. So making sure they have that, and then making sure that they have some social time. So a lot of families have tech-free times at breakfast or lunch or supper, and just giving priority to people in person. So if a friend comes over, maybe you're not on your screens, maybe you're actually engaging in something else, right? So there's no official limits for screen time over age 6 now. But when does screen time, like it comes, self-regulation comes, so.
Okay.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna,
Also, the workshop idea was new to us, so we will look into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
the workshop idea?
I would like nails and wood and hammer and stuff.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, there's so many.
Can I add
great
one
things
more
to
thing to
do.
that? Is that don't leave everything out at once, because kids get visual overload. Rotate.
Mm.
So pack things away for a few weeks and then bring something out later.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also extensions for things too. I know my son has built forts outside. My daughter has simulated like a baking show. She's loves watching YouTube baking shows, and she would go out in the playhouse and pretend she was running a YouTube baking show and play within the sand and extra dishes, and you could hear her talking away and and having her audience and engaging her audience with that. And there's so many interesting, running a business and selling to the neighbors and dressing up the kittens. Like there was endless hours of putting kittens in strollers and dressing them up and having plays with them and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's so many things that we can do. So I'm going to move to the next question. We are on our own version of unschooling and self-directed learning. My son, 8, loves gaming and watching YouTubers who game. I understand the benefits of both. One of my goals for my 2 children are they discover their passions in life and are eventually able to find a way to support themselves doing their passions. My son is one of those kids who would play games and watch YouTube all day and night if he had no limits. I worry he will miss that time to discover his passions. I also understand gaming could be his passion, but how do you differentiate between passion and gaming addiction?
I can talk a little bit about this addiction thing, because I think my son had a period of time where he was addicted to the screens. I think when that happens, there's always a reason, like Judy said, with the ACEs. So he had an adverse childhood experience and he turned to screens as a way to numb out of his feelings and being overwhelmed by his post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think when it's an addiction, it's very different. It's not the same as just wanting to be on screen time. It's too compelling. They get very emotional about it, and it's also caused by something, and you are usually aware of what that cause is. So I do think that there's addiction, but there's usually a reason. And the thing is, you can't solve an addiction just by removing the addictive thing. You have to let them go through it and try to solve the problem in other ways, like social connection, making sure that they have other things, that they feel supported, that they have someone to talk to. All of those things are important at solving the underlying problem of addiction. And that's true of anybody. Gabor Mate talks about that in his book about addictions. And so I think that solving the addiction problem is not just taking away the screen time, it's also adding other things. It's not helpful to take away the one thing that's helping them cope with their problem. And the answer to the difference between passion, well, like I said, it's really obvious when it's an addiction, and there's usually a reason for addiction. So I don't know, Judy probably has an answer to this one too.
Yeah, I think that I think you summed it up really good, Golda, is that, yeah, you can't, I mean, there is addiction, but there's 95% of watching YouTube and playing games is that they're compelling. They're not addicting, they're compelling. They keep you there. My son did a university report on this, on the embedded hooks in games that keep you going and keep you coming back, right? And again, watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix and you'll see they talk about it, how it's embedded in social media and other things too. So sometimes we just feel like puppets. But I have to say, maybe his passion is something he's finding on screens, right? A lot of parents say, oh, my child would never self-regulate. He would just stay on YouTube all day. But really, maybe for the first couple months, yes, that tends to happen. But eventually, as kids get older, they do self-regulate. They do realize that I have a job to go to. It's kind of like unschooling when, you know, people say to you, well, just wait till they have to get up for a job someday at 8 a.m., you know, and your teens are sleeping till 2. Well, when they need to do it, they're going to do it. So if your child is 17 and can't put screens down to get to their job or to get to a class or to get to a commitment they've made, okay, maybe they do have an addiction. Address it then, right? But you can't gauge addiction by your child's reaction when you say, no, you're off screens, because that's just normal childhood pushback. Very normal. Everybody has it. I faced it with my kids. I would say, well, we agreed to this time limit. We have to go to the dentist now. We have to go. And they would whine and scream and tantrum and storm off. That's normal. That's normal saying no to children. It doesn't mean they have an addiction. What it means is that those games are very compelling and they don't want to stop. Kind of like I don't want to stop doing things I love too. Only I have a bit more executive function in that I don't grumble as much. Okay, but and there's a lot of studies out there that show that kids who have a lot of screen time, that is their passion, and they're very likely to go into a STEM career. There was a really good article in today's Parent Magazine. I'll try and find it when somebody else is talking, but there's a lot of studies out there that show that kids who have a lot of screen time, that is their passion. They're naturally drawn to it, because there's a lot of kids out there who don't go on screens, don't want screen time. And my kids were never friends with those kids long because they hung around with friends who had the same interests. They would jump on, you know, screens and play together, Minecraft, whatever. So, yeah, so it probably is his passion, but I wouldn't worry about addiction till he's 17 and can't put it down.
Okay, thank you, Judy and Golda. I'm going to keep going through the chat as well. Judy had mentioned The Social Dilemma. Yep, that's the name of the one on Netflix. Mai had said, thank you, host, because she had posted the last question, but she had to go. She just asked about the recorded version. so we can let her know. We are posting this on Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids Patreon page. It will be on there first. So if you're a patron, you'll have access to that. And then later on, I think Judy will share it on Unschooling. Yeah, we'll let you know. We'll be in touch after that later on where it will be shared. Your Undivided Attention is an excellent podcast that sheds light on AI and how it is used to steal people's attention. Okay, I haven't heard of that one. I'll definitely check that one out as well. Thank you, Marissa. Okay, thank you very much. People saying thank you. Those are all amazing suggestions. Start young. So it's just a normal thing in your house. This is my first year homeschooling or unschooling my 10 and 14-year-old boys. And it's a challenge to find things for them to engage in that are not screen related. That being said, my 18-year-old daughter has been homeschooled for the last 5 years and she graduates this year. She is a perfect picture of what unschooling can look like and pursuing many interests and learning about so many things that she loves. Maybe her personality leans more in this direction than her brothers. It was a bit of a shock to me that my boys haven't grabbed onto this as easily as she did, but maybe it will take time. That wasn't a question, just a general comment for others. Okay, thank you very much for sharing. Okay, thank you for so much for your time and wealth of information. Yeah, I do actually just want to add to that our kids are all very different, just like each one of us is very different, and we will be directed, our interests will vary, they will change as well. And it's really, I guess it's interesting here in North America because screen time is a big topic right now. And how we face it or how we view it and how we have it in our lives. I know I lived in Korea for quite a long time, and there it's really interesting because they do intensive schooling, like the kids go to school for many, many hours in the day, but they are also really, really big gamers. So you can actually go on the streets, there are little shops set up where you can go in just to game, and you go in and it's dark and it's filled with computers and everybody is in there gaming, and you just pay by the hour or by the half an hour just to go in and game. You go to the shopping mall, they have one floor dedicated just to gaming. And there's like a gaming competition going on nonstop where you can see the gamers, they can go up into the booth. There's a whole audience that just sits and watches them. And then they have it on the giant jumbo screen. And that's a feature in a shopping mall, in many shopping malls, wherever you go. And so yeah, they are very digital. Everything there's free Wi-Fi access everywhere you go. It is just a very different concept around gaming and screens there as well. Every bus has TV playing and screens playing. Everyone is on their screens as well. So it's very different. The lifestyle there is very different than in North America and how they approach gaming and screens as well.
And that's the same in Japan too.
Yes.
Where they're very much screen focused, but yeah, but they still have interaction time, they still have family time, they still have, times like that. And I think if you make that routine, like if you put that as a value, I think that's good. So for example, in our house, dinner time is always no screens. That's the rule. It's been that rule since the kids were little. They don't push back anymore. They like it. And they come to the table, even if they're not hungry, they come because it's a social time, right? And then we go back to our screens after. But you could build those routines into your house. If that's what you want, build it in. The kids will start, doing that for them too, right? And going forward, they will build those tech-free times into their routines too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just wanted to say on your comment too, that the gaming industry is a billions-dollar industry. It's surpassing the movie industry. Like it's huge worldwide in jobs, and they're going to need jobs. There's so many jobs in cybersecurity, in gaming, in IT. So if that's your child's passion, they're going to have lots of work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The other thing as well too, I think we should always take note of is, when we're talking about limiting screen time, restricting screen time, also be aware of how we as adults are modeling our screen time. I find sometimes that we want our kids to get off of screens, but yet we are holding our phones in our hands. And while they're talking to us, we're checking social media, or we're texting, or we're taking a call in the middle of them being engaged in something. And so it's like we're telling them to do something, but the actions and signals we're giving them is completely opposite. I know my daughter at one time, actually, she was like confronted us with this, and we had, we were talking about, this was when they were younger, limiting screens at a certain time in the evening, saying everything is off. And she said to us, well, you still have your phones. And I find that it's really not honoring what you're saying, because even though we're together, you are both on your phones and you're checking messages and you're texting, you're doing all of these other things, and you're not present. And she was completely right. And so her request to us is that we put our phones away from 5 o'clock until she's asleep, because she, she recognized that. And we had to honor it. That was her ask. If we were asking them to do something, we absolutely had to respect and honor the same thing as well. Judy, what did you want to say?
And that's, the research shows that under age 5, that's the primary time for language development. And there is gaps in kids that have too much screen time and their parents are not engaging with them in terms of what we call serve and return. So responding to them when they pester them or need something or want to talk. So the research shows after age 5, it doesn't matter, but under age 5, it's very important to limit screen time and to engage. So for parents to put down their devices and engage, for sure. Now, as moderator, we have about 18 minutes left. I really have to end at 3. Do you wanted to talk a bit about social media, Robin?
Yes.
And
Judy, I'm just going to read this one last comment, and then that would be great. This episode of Living Joyfully gave me a lot to think about. If they're allowed to watch however many hours they want, they will watch until the marginal utility of another hour of TV isn't as high as a marginal utility of something else that they might want to do. If you restrict it, then the marginal utility of one more hour of TV is pretty much always higher than the marginal utility of anything else that they might do. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. That's right. That's Pam Larikia's episode.
I want to say that really got to me. Actually, I was reading part of the transcript one day about this, and I thought, I grew up without a TV, and my parents got our first TV when I was 13 years old. And even now, I find it hard to tear my eyes away from a television when it's on, because I think, and we had huge restrictions on TV time, and so it was always a little bit more compelling for me than other people. I think that's a really good point that Pam brought out in her podcast.
Forbidden fruit always tastes the sweetest.
That's right. Yeah, it sure does.
So do you want to chat about social media? So I'm not too sure what to say because my kids are not on social media, and I have girls too. I think but Robin, you have a daughter who's heading into that social media. One thing I did want to say is when my kids were on social media, they didn't use their real names. Just because kids are kids, they make mistakes, they post things they shouldn't. When they were 18 and had a more developed prefrontal cortex, then they used their real names because they actually had to go on social media and get a Twitter account for a university course. So, but how do you find your daughter navigating social media? Do you have limits? How do you handle that whole world in your family?
Well, there is Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. I think those are probably the big ones for young people right now, right? And she is on them. I find Snapchat is that's their way of texting and keeping in touch of what's going on, or if they're going to meet up at the ski hill or things like that. And TikTok is TikTok. Making the videos, watching the videos. It's been a great way to have a conversation about, especially going, puberty and development and other friends as well. There have been actual instances with people that they know who have posted some content that wasn't appropriate. And, you know, even it was content that they thought was going to be private that was then shared with others. So, you know, that brought great conversations of privacy and even around laws that are coming up now. And again, pornography and children and what's, you know, violations and things like that, and how we should still be safe and careful. I think the biggest thing is that we ask her to keep engaged with us, and she's been pretty good about that. But we also make a point of, because she is someone who's a little bit more introverted. And so we make a point of trying to have regular conversations about, you know, what's going on, what's happening with, you know, the kids in the community. My husband actually, they go through, like, he likes to see what's happening on TikTok and Snapchat. And so she'll go through her account with him. And so she also gives me all of the tips as well. The interesting thing is she's been doing a lot of social media with my podcast. So she gives me a lot of the tips of what's happening now. She's actually set up a TikTok account for my podcast. She's making the videos, all of that. It's been great because now she can also take her skills and use it to help in that way. But she also lets me know about all those other things that I think I might not know about, like the secret accounts that kids sometimes have, those things that I might not always be privy to. So it's been a great conversation. But at the same time, when I do see what, she's sharing with me, I, as an adult, think, this is something that probably we can have a conversation about. And I ask her, how do you feel about this? What do you think about what you're seeing? How real do you think this is? So it's also interesting to get her viewpoint, because she's also still young, and there's some things that, she sees, but sometimes there's some explaining to show what's behind the scenes. So just being aware, and also predators as well too. That's as well something, because we always say please, and she knows the signs to look out for, because both herself and her cousins have been contacted, people that reach out and text and try and fish, right? So it's just something that I'm just very conscious of and aware with. My son is not really active on social media, so he just kind of he has his own thing going, and he's just kind of feels like he doesn't have as much time for it, I guess. So yeah, but I know it's come up with some other parents, so that's why I just thought. Does anyone else have any questions about that? Or Judy, do you have anything else to add? I know, especially with your kids, you usually have insights into the back end of those things too. Oh, you're on mute.
No, it's just that when my kids got to about the age of 12, I had to be there is so many stories I'd love to tell you, and so many anecdotes and things, and we came to an agreement where I had to ask their permission to post stories about them online, pictures, things like that. And they do this, well, they don't post anything about me online, but it's more me. But it's been very hard because I got them to go through the book at least and read it and make sure anything I told about them in the book. I also used assumed names in the book just to protect my children's identity, and that's what one of their requests was. So I think we have to be very careful what we post about our kids and have that consent and that conversation about consent. Yeah, there's so much I'd love to tell you about them, and because I'm so proud of them, but I do want to tell everyone that my biggest video gamer is now working for a major video game company. So, so their passions come out early. Yeah, Golda, do you have anything to add? And then maybe we should just kind of wrap up where people can find us, because I don't know if there's any more questions, but yeah, Golda?
The questions are pretty well done. It's mostly just thank you for the information. Someone had said this would be a great topic on Clubhouse. Yes, absolutely. We can make that as maybe our next Clubhouse topic as well. I'm waiting for Judy to be able to get onto Clubhouse too here. So yeah, Golda, sorry.
No, that's okay. I don't have. Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Oh, okay. So I love everything that I've heard. And I, so the other day I was speaking with someone and she said that her grandchildren are ages 6 and 7, and they each have iPhones. And so there's the parent in me and the educator in me. And I had to take a breath. Uh, and also, I come to the table having been an educator uh, in many communities where I have seen firsthand that children spend so much time in screen time, so much time where they're not being engaged with their parents and family members. Um, and what that equals to is illiteracy. And so now that I'm with Sammy full time, I want him to, oh my gosh, reading is just so important because I know reading is the ticket, is the key to having a fulfilling life. You have to be literate. I'm not pushing reading on him in terms of, I'm doing it the unschooling way. I'm immersing him in literature, but we're not doing the alphabet. We're not doing phonics. We're not doing any of that stuff. I'm very holistic with it. But we read a lot, and I want him to have a love and a joy of reading. But that's the big thing. And it's not with Sammy. It's with other children where I can see that if they do spend hours on end with screen time and iPhone and social media and gaming and in those instances where there is no love of reading, there's no introduction to reading, there's no let's go to the library and do this, that, and the other. Sadly, many of them do get to third grade in schools, and many of them do get held back, and many of them sadly do become bored in classrooms, and we know what the rest is history. And so I don't want to be a downer at all. I'm all for this, but balance is so important and so key. Just want to throw that out there, that my heart still thinks about how I wish others could be part of this conversation and to see how it needs to be balanced. So that's just something I wanted to add. Thank you.
I have to say I disagree because screen time is literacy. When kids go on, and that's why we had this big debate with our public library once they held a contest for summer reading and they gave away a computer, and parents would say, what, you're all about literacy and literature and reading and you hand out screens. But really, this is the reality. Whether your child's reading in a book or on a screen, it's literacy. And kids, the research shows we're reading more and more with our screens. And books are still the number one things bought on the internet, like books, not just screen books, but real physical paper books. So I think in all my years of unschooling, have never encountered a child over the age of 12 who can't read. And we know through brain development that you can push books all you want. You can have family reading time every day. You can have the routines, have the content, but a child's brain has to make it work. And it's all depends on development and their individual schedule. Just like every child toilet trains and starts walking at different ages. So I think, yes, it's good to have, unschooling is having an environment immersed in literacy, whether that's screens, whether it's books, whether it's through number games, having those little magnetic letters on your fridge, that's literacy too. So yeah. And Judy, so I haven't met anyone over the age of 12 who can't read. And I think a lot of the research studies are done on kids in school. And yeah, they say, well, if a child's behind by grade 3, it's this horrible trajectory for life. And really, they're comparing kids in school. Well, they're not. They're just comparing kids in school to kids in school. There's no research studies done on unschooled kids and homeschooled kids and what age they learn to read. So until we have better research out there, I think all literacy is good.
Right. And I'll just, and I agree with you. I do. And again, I guess my main point is saying that we here in this community right now, we are at such an advantage. And I appreciate this. I'm here taking notes. You know, I learned so much from Robin and from all of you. I'm here taking my notes. And we are at such an advantage here, our little community that's growing, like Robin said. And so when I was talking about, I'm talking about other children that sadly won't be unschooled, you know, and I don't want to put a damper on this. I wish everyone could unschool, you know, and hopefully we will be able to change minds and change educational systems one day. But the reality, as we all know, we should know, is that in school, sadly, children are going to be tested. And if they're not on grade level, they will be held back. And we have a lot of families that will just give their children computers and screen time and will do nothing else. But we here are doing the right thing. So I'm just trying to make a comparison. That's it.
Yeah, and I think Golda and I have actually even recently just been, we have lots of conversations about this too. I think the other thing to note as well is the exception is we're extremely engaged parents. And I think what happens many times is it's not even, you know, there's some who just, there's a disconnection. And unfortunately, I think, you know, where Judy was talking about the ACEs and, you know, the importance of that, the adverse childhood experiences. And so many of those adverse childhood experiences we're seeing, and the trauma is affecting the learning. And when that foundation is lost, when it's not there, and those those ACEs, those experiences, that disconnection is, if that's what's present instead, then that learning has a really hard time. Those synapses are, you know, they're not firing in the way that we would want them to fire. I think it's, you know, that's a whole other society, community. There's, you know, there's so many other things connected with that going on right now. You know, I also do work with the Rural Mental Health Association project, and I'm also on another rural crime committee within our province. So these conversations actually come into those conversations as well. And it's, we could go on for another, but yeah, I think that is the other thing, is that we have very engaged parents right now. Everyone here has taken the time to learn more and to do more with that. And that's really the huge foundation. So yeah, thank you, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree. I know what you're saying, Leslie, because I was a school principal. So I know that there's dysfunctional families out there, and maybe they should not be unschooling because they're having a hard time just parenting. So that's what Robin was talking about. I do think the school system leads some kids into not reading, on like just the way that we've structured it. So I agreed with Judy too on that one, because I've seen that with my own son. He had actually decided he was never going to read, and he was in grade 3, and I took him out of school, and within 6 months he was reading because the pressure was gone and he didn't have to. And now suddenly it was his decision that he wanted to read, and he suddenly, so I think partly what we do in school actually leads kids to be illiterate. And that's one of the biggest problems in our school system. But I know we are out of time, so I better stop talking now.
Okay, I just want to, so Robin, tell everybody where we can find you. Where's your podcast?
Yeah, you can find me. And I just found, I was searching for that link, the Brain Story course. And I think just Judy, if you want to confirm if that's the right link for that certification, it's a great course. It's fantastic. So you can find me. I'm on any podcast player. My website, look for Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids. My website is imhomeschooling.com. On social media at Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids as well. It's a great way to reach me, as we're talking all about the social media. Yes, I'm on social media quite a bit. It's a fantastic tool to reach people. And then I'm on Clubhouse now as well. Someone had mentioned it's a great Clubhouse topic. So if you're on Clubhouse, find me there. I've been doing weekly rooms. Now I'm Tuesday afternoon, Saturday mornings, and then I'm starting to host in the Homeschool Club as well. Yeah, and if you would like an invite and you're on an iPhone, because yet they have not yet reached Android, let me know and I can send you an invite, because we're trying to grow the homeschooling and unschooling community on there. And yeah, those are the best places to reach me. So
Or
thank
an
you very
iPad,
much.
I might add, because that's
Or an
how I
iPad.
got on.
Yes, that's right. Phone number and an iPad. That's right.
Thanks, Robin. Golda, where can we
Thank you.
find you?
I have a website. It's called Demystifying Education. I'm also on Twitter not Twitter, sorry, but Instagram at Just Golda. And then I have a Facebook page for my website, Demystifying Education, as well.
Hey, great. And I have a parenting blog at judyarnall.com. And then my unschooling blog is unschoolingtouniversity.com. And you can find me everywhere on social media except for Clubhouse. And I'm on TikTok too, but I messed up and made 2 accounts, so I don't know what account I'm on yet. I got to sort that one out. But
I'll have to find you. I didn't know. I'm very new on it. Obviously, I have to ask my daughter how to navigate it. So I'll look for you. That's great.
yeah. So thank you everybody for joining us today, and for Golda, Robin, and myself. Yeah. So we'll, if you're worried about where to find the recording, just contact one of us and we'll point you to wherever it might be. So thank you, everybody. Have a good Sunday.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.